So we've seen that Noah, this man who is expected to bring comfort, is a man who walks with God. And in this walking with God, there's security. Noah will be safe from the effects of the sin that pollutes the world around him. The ark is patterned after the sacred space of Eden. It also foreshadows the future tabernacle where God's people will learn to live in right relationship to Him. The Lord said to Noah, "Come into the ark, you and all your household, for I consider you godly among this generation." We've already seen that it's not good for man to be alone. So even though it's Noah's righteousness being considered, his family are included in his deliverance. God says, "You must take with you 7 of every kind of clean animal, the male and its mate." In Hebrew it says a man and his wife, which I think is so cute. 2 of every kind of unclean animal, the male and its mate. And also 7 of every kind of bird in the sky, male and female, to preserve their offspring on the face of the earth. There's more 7s again. This is a complete representation of creation being preserved. There's hope from the beginning all the way through. So what's the deal with clean and unclean animals? These categories haven't been established yet. Once we have the law of Moses and the tabernacle, we'll learn about what animals are clean and unclean. But apparently, Noah already knew these categories. Notice that God wants to preserve both clean animals and unclean animals. They're all part of His good creation. Clean and unclean are not inherently moral categories. That confuses a lot of modern readers. We think pure always means morally good, and impure always means morally impure. That's a category error, but let's not get too far ahead. Don't miss that key word, preserve their offspring or seed. It's the same word we've been tracking from the beginning of Genesis. "For in 7 days I will cause it to rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the ground every living thing that I have made." 7 days, that should ring a bell. The book started with God's Spirit hovering over the chaotic waters, and then a sequence of 7 days framed God's creation. Now we get this warning that chaotic waters are going to come in 7 days. So it's an uncreation. It's a reversal of what God made and how things were ordered. This judgment is clearly not God's ideal. He said what He made was good. The land, the plants, the animals, the people, but human violence has corrupted His good world so thoroughly that He has to wipe the slate clean. Well, now we move down in Noah's perspective. "And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him." That phrase gets repeated a lot in this story. Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters engulfed the earth. Noah entered the ark along with his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives because of the flood waters. Pairs of clean animals, of unclean animals, of birds, and of everything that creeps along the ground, male and female, came into the ark to Noah just as God had commanded him. And after 7 days, the flood waters engulfed the earth. Again, we're faced with the 7-day motif. In the beginning, we saw God take the chaotic waters and build order and beauty and blessing and thriving ecosystems and relational harmony with image-bearing vice regions. So if we work backwards then, what happens? When order and stability are stripped away, when life is knocked off balance, when chaos rises and we lose all control of our lives, what does that say about God? In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and the rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So the day and night cycle reminds us of the creation story, the evening and morning pattern. And water is coming from 2 places, from the great deep and from the heavens. Sound familiar? The waters beneath and the waters above? This is a depiction of decreation. It's an undoing of the order that God had put in place. On that very day, Noah entered the ark, accompanied by his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, along with his wife and his sons' 3 wives. They entered, along with every living creature after its kind, every animal after its kind, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth after its kind, and every bird after its kind, everything with wings. Pairs of all creatures that have the breath of life came into the ark to Noah. So these categories of animals coming after their kind sounds a lot like the creation account. Now they're coming to this place of rest, this place of new creation that exists in the middle of an undoing. Those that entered were male and female, just as God commanded him. Then the Lord shut him in. The last time we saw God shut something was when He took a side from Adam and closed up the flesh. And then what happened? New life in Eden. So there's a glimmer of hope. But then the flood comes, it lifts up the ark, and it says the waters completely inundated the earth, or the land, so that even all the high mountains under the entire sky were covered. There's a lot of absolutizing language here. All the mountains, all the sky, all the land. So for some readers who love Jesus and want to be faithful to the scriptures, this is cut and dry. They say that to be faithful to the text, we have to understand this as a literal global flood. The strength of this view is that it makes the most sense of the context. The sin problem was a universal one, and so the judgment is universal. The language of all mountains and all land seems to mean everything. God doesn't tell Noah to move to a distant country. He has to build a box because presumably that distant country is going to be underwater too. Well, a second view held by other people who love Jesus and want to be faithful to the scriptures is that this story describes a more localized or regional flood, like a cataclysmic deluge from the Black Sea. After all, the Hebrew word often translated earth usually just means land, and certainly not the globe that we as modern readers are familiar with. Proponents of this view point out that all and everything are often used in the Bible to mean everything within a particular frame of reference. Genesis 41:57, for example, says, "And all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe everywhere." Does this literally mean people from every part of planet Earth came to Egypt? I don't think so. It certainly doesn't mean every person, because at least Jacob stayed behind. But that universal language is used as a figure of speech. Just like if your kid chucks a carton of yogurt across the kitchen, you might say that yogurt went everywhere. It's hyperbole to show the significance and severity of an event, rather than the exact details and measurements. After the flood, we read about the Table of Nations, and it only covers a regional area, not every point on the globe. The known world then was much smaller than the known world today. The author of Genesis seems to focus primarily on one major region of the world. So, Christians who trust the scriptures and love the Lord read this story and come to different conclusions. That's fine. It's even fine not to know where you stand on these issues. I would just caution against using any particular view as a stumbling block for other believers. It's not a gatekeeping issue. As we've seen, the New Testament authors, including Jesus himself, seem much less concerned about how this played out and much more concerned about the patterns in the story that point to God and his relationship to his people. Verse 20, the waters rose more than 20 feet above the mountains, or it could read up the mountains. And all living things that moved on the earth died, including the birds, domestic animals, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all humankind. Everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. So sin brought death. We're reminded of God breathing life into Adam. Sin has reversed the process. So the Lord destroyed every living thing that was on the surface of the ground, including people, animals, creatures that creep along the ground, and birds of the sky. They were wiped off the earth. Only Noah and those who were with him in the ark survived. The waters prevailed over the earth for 150 days. God's judgment on human violence and evil was thorough. Creation is undone. And yet this wasn't how it was supposed to be. God wanted life for his creation. Death is an enemy, and God will not let that enemy have the final say.